Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted and privileged to welcome a very, very tall leader from the world of technology in India, a friend and a neighbor, Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik. Bhaskar, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. It's going to be a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you. Bhaskar is the former chairman of Microsoft India. He's a former board member of the State Bank of India. He's on the boards of several organizations, and he's been recognized, awarded, and felicitated several times. Bhaskar, we're going to talk about your amazing journey. So let me ask you first to tell me a little bit about what your career graph has been like and what got you into technology.
That's an interesting question. So, I've always been passionate about technology, and I graduated from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. In those days, you could at best get an electrical engineering degree, but I spent most of my time in the computer center. But you'd be surprised that once I graduated, the first job I got was as a management trainee in DCM.
Okay.
And that too in the textile division. So I actually started my career the first 3 years actually selling cloth, selling textiles, selling saris. DCM had a data products division, but I remember I asked for a transfer to the data products division, but they said, no, you're a management trainee, and therefore you go wherever we let you, wherever we believe you would be the most successful, or where the company needs you. That's where you should go. And at that time, the head of HR was Dharamveer, who used to be a former governor of, I think, West Bengal. And that was his advice to me. He says that, you have to go through all these different functions and at that time, data products wasn't such a big business. So that's when I left them. And then I spent close to about 10 years with the Tatas. I actually worked for Ratan Tata for close to 10 years.
Wow.
And I became the divisional manager, then the general manager of the business systems division. That's when my career in technology really blossomed.
Wow.
And then from there, I worked for a number of multinational companies. It was, Hewlett Packard, back in the days when it was both a test and measuring instrument company and a computer company.
Correct.
I worked for Digital Equipment Corporation. I worked for Sun Microsystems. I worked very briefly for Oracle when Oracle bought Sun Microsystems. And then I worked for, my last stint was as chairman of Microsoft in India.
Amazing.
And I worked both in India as well as in Singapore in an Asia Pacific role, and also in the US as a corporate VP in Sun for a complete range of non-Sun Solaris products.
Incredible.
So that's been my career in short.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And not only are you my neighbor, but I now suddenly realize that you and I started our lives in the same organization. You started in DCM, I started in Usha Sales.
Okay.
8 weeks before I went to do my MBA. But this is all about you today. And so today, let's talk about the metaverse, Bhaskar.
Sure.
And I know that you're very passionate about the metaverse. For my young viewers and listeners, let me start by asking you, what is the metaverse and how is it impacting our lives?
Sure. I just written a piece around the metaverse because there's so much talked about the metaverse, and that's actually thanks to Zuckerberg, who took Facebook and then converted into Meta.
Yeah.
But if you look at the underpinnings of the metaverse, it's always existed. And so let me try and define it my way.
Correct.
So metaverse is actually composed of two words, the word meta and verse. Meta, if you look up the English dictionary, the meaning is about higher, beyond. So when you say metaphysics, it means beyond physics, or when you say metadata, it's beyond the data. So it's the same thing. And verse is basically a short form for universe. And therefore the metaverse is beyond or a higher place than your current universe or reality.
Brilliant. Okay.
So if you think about it from that perspective, then I think, it sort of all falls into place. The other thing, I think it's important to realize is that the metaverse is a vision. We're on a journey because the current definitions of metaverse, if you go to, Gartner or anybody else, it's very limited. And therefore, what you can do with the metaverse is still to evolve.
Correct.
In fact, you can find better definitions of or better examples of the metaverse if you actually read science fiction. I don't know if you read science fiction, but I'm a great reader of science fiction. And you will find that there are references to situations which are very similar to what we believe is the metaverse. But the current versions of metaverse are limited, and it doesn't go to the way the science fiction authors talk about. So what is the current version of the metaverse? So I'll start with the internet, because if you look at the internet, the internet is what I would call the 2D version of the metaverse, because the definition of a metaverse is really a virtual shared space that is always on. It can be experienced live and in real time. It can host any size of audience, and it has a fully functioning economy, which allows digital assets to be carried across platforms.
Correct.
If you look at the state of the internet today, a lot of this you can do, but in a 2D world. So you can share experiences across a multitude of different media. You can invite whomsoever you want into your 2D reality, and even perform e-commerce activities, allowing digital assets to be transferred over platforms. And additionally, individuals and businesses also influence your reality. So I think all of us can sort of realize that that's actually happening even today. So simply put, the current 2D version of the metaverse is an embodiment of the internet, where instead of just viewing content, you're in it and you have the powers to affect outcomes. The internet overlay is largely 2D, which is text, voice, images, video, but that's about to change.
Amazing.
So when Zuckerberg talked about Meta, the original Facebook was in the age of the internet in 2D. But now when he talked about the metaverse, actually what he was referring to is what I would call the next generation of the metaverse, where you've taken a 3D layer and you've put it on top of the internet. Okay, the 3D metaverse, it doesn't compete with the internet, it builds on it. And in this metaverse, users traverse a virtual world that mimics aspects of the physical world using technologies such as virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, social media, digital currency. The internet is something that people browse.
Correct.
While in the case of the multiverse, people can live in it. So that's the best way I can explain it, rather than getting into elements of technology. But just think about it as the next version of the internet, a 3D version of the internet. That's why they also sometimes call it the Web 3.0.
Well said. But one of the other things, Bhaskar, is that the early users of the metaverse are primarily gamers.
Absolutely.
How do you see the metaverse impacting common people's lives?
So if you think about how we defined it, that how you can create a digital version of your current life, and you can live in either the digital world, or you can live in the real world, or with augmented reality you can actually merge the two. Then many things which you were you did in your real life, and you could perhaps mimic in a 2D, like for example video conferencing, the way we are talking just now. But in the metaverse, I could actually be sitting next to you, and we could be having this conversation, and I could see what you're seeing, and you could see what I'm seeing, rather than just static screens. And then if we wanted to let's say talk a little bit more about a specific subject, like you just talked about gaming, we could actually go into a specific game like Minecraft, and then we could be in a completely different world altogether, where we are actually building different universe and different planets.
Very interesting.
So that's just a simple example. So if you think about travel, today we do have video conferencing, but it is still 2D. But just imagine with the multiverse, you could actually hop across to the US and shake hands with your, whoever is your best friend there. You could actually have a dinner with them or a party with them. Or if they're a co-worker, you could actually work together and collaborate on something, whether it's an article, whether it's a new design, or whether it's an IP. So there's many things.
Fascinating.
And you talked about gaming. So I just want to touch upon that.
Yeah.
Gaming was the original multiverse. And that was fueled by people's imagination. All of us had the aspiration of being able to drive a Porsche. But how many of us have got a chance? One is affordability, and secondly is availability.
Correct.
And then the third is, where do I drive it?
Correct.
Now you can buy a game like Forza, and you can choose any car you want, and you can take any racing strip anywhere in the world, and you can actually sit and actually drive it.
True.
In the 2D version, you could just drive along with it using a joystick. But in a 3D version, you can actually wear the helmets, you can wear the HoloLens, you can actually feel that you're within. So the experience has become that more live. So think about everything you're doing currently, but think about the depth of distance, the depth of time, the depth of, and time means that you can interact with historical figures.
Correct.
Yeah, you could have a conversation with Mahatma Gandhi. So, it gives you a lot of possibilities, which previously were in the domain of what I call dreams. So all of us as childhoods, we used to read books and we used to conjure up all these different images.
Correct.
And that was in our dreams, which was unconscious, and it was only for ourselves. But we also used to daydream. You read a book and then you figure out, this is what it looks like, all of that. The cinema, producers, they take that imagination and they make it into a movie.
Correct.
But today, with the way metaverse is moving, you will find that a lot of what we used to daydream, is now creating that's next and more successive, versions of what I would call the metaverse.
Well said.
Metaverse is driven by imagination.
Well said. But what you said very rightly, that metaverse is possibly Internet 3.0. But my question to you, Bhaskar, is that there seem to be multiple metaverses. Facebook is developing their own. I think Google is developing its own. How does one decide which is the right metaverse? Or do you think there will be a complete shakeout?
No, there will be multiple universes, multiple metaverses. I mean, that's given as a fact.
Okay.
So if you look at each one of these companies, they're approaching it from a different perspective. Let's take the bigger companies.
Right.
So Facebook, for them, it is creating a social platform in which people can get together, interact, and do many things, including work, play, etc., leisure, enjoy, everything else. So there's a large number of companies which are actually focused in that area. Right. For example, there's a startup here in India called Loka, which is doing exactly the same thing. Okay. His twist is that he's taking places of interest in India, like a Marine Drive or a Connaught Place, and he's creating a virtual world, a digital world, where you can actually go in and interact with people, but in Connaught Place. You can visit the shops, you can buy something, you can go out into the central part of Connaught Place and you can dance with people, you can have concerts there where you can go and attend. So those are basically more from a social perspective. But then there are people like, for example, Microsoft. Microsoft is focusing on the world of collaboration, on the world of interaction and meetings. So they've taken their Teams platform, they've introduced a product called Mesh, and Mesh enables you to create virtual avatar, which can actually interact with you you can have a video conference or a conference where you could be sitting as an avatar, or you could be interacting with people who are actually physically there, and they can see you as an avatar and they can converse with you as if you were just sitting next to them. So each company is actually looking at it from a different perspective. If you look at some of the other companies, there is one which is called, just one second, it's called Epic Games, for example, is an entertainment company, and they're looking at creating many more games and a fantasy land where you can actually go and you can play games of 3D games in multiple different ways. Its vision is different from Facebook in that it wants to provide a communal space for users to interact with each other and brands without news feeds riddled with ads. So it's a slightly different, still social, you focus on entertainment. And it is basically, the whole idea is to get people involved from an emotion and other perspectives rather than from a content perspective. The last example I'd like to give is a company called It's called Second Life. Second Life is actually a very old company. I first, played around with their application in the early in 88. Sorry, 98. I think I was in the US at that time. So it was, it was 2008 to 2010. It was a California company, and they created a complete universe where you could create your own avatar, and you could go in and attend conferences. You could attend concerts, and they had their own currency. They've been there for the last 20 years, and they've got close to about 1 million subscribers.
Amazing.
So like this, you've got all these different universes are focused on a different aspect. Some for entertainment, some for games, some for social, some for work and collaboration. So you will have multiple such.
Amazing. And for a lot of the young people who will be listening to our conversation, how or when can they start to create an avatar?
Immediately. I mean, you got multiple applications or multiple metaverses where you can actually choose. LinkedIn, for example, is the one I've actually tried. So I have an avatar of myself in LinkedIn, and you can fashion it, customize it. A lot of it is just free because they give you that access to that technology. But you can also buy. I want to buy a Nike shoe because I want my avatar to look very fashion conscious. Right. I want the latest jeans from Calvin Klein. I want the shoes from Nike. You can actually purchase for your avatar, and then it will be fitted onto you. So there is even Loka, for example, the Indian. There it's got a limited choice in terms of what they're working towards creating. The ability to create different avatars more similar to what you look like or what your fashion styles are, etc.
Amazing. And I believe you need a 5G network to be able to effectively use the metaverse. Would that be correct?
Yes. So there's a huge amount of computing power required, both at the back end on the cloud server part of it, as well as in the front end, the edge of the computing, and obviously in the network. But it is still workable today. So basically, technology has progressed. Compression techniques are much better. Video, etc., are all much lighter weight. So you can do a lot of these things. From a 2D perspective. On a 3D perspective, yes, the higher speed bandwidth you got, the better it is. So that will make a lot of difference. And the other thing to me, what 5G gives is not just higher speeds. 5G gives you constant connectivity.
Correct.
So today, for example, when you're at home, you got high bandwidth, but when you get onto your car, your bandwidth drops. The mobile networks are not able to keep. That's where 5G will come in useful, because you'll always have a local connection which gives you that speed.
Well said. Well said. My next question to you, Bhaskar, is, the whole world has been taken by storm with this metaverse. How is the Indian corporate sector, and I'm not referring to the Indian tech sector, but the Indian corporate sector, how are they adapting to the metaverse, and what are the opportunities for them?
So at the present moment, a lot of them, especially in the consumer goods and the retail services, the entertainment, they're all looking at metaverse as a viable option. And again, it's moving from the 2D world to the 3D world. That's the opportunity. So they're looking at how they can make their products and their services much more attractive. And then, for example, one of the companies I'm on the board of, it's in the business of democratizing sports. So therefore, outside of their main business, they're actually created a 3D metaverse which is a sports stadium. And if you go into that sports stadium, you can actually view the IPL along with your friends, or you can actually play a game of basketball along with your friends. Now, it's still experimental, hasn't it yet been launched? But that's one example. And there's another brand I'm associated with it, a women's apparel company, TCNS. So there again, they're an online company. They're a multi-channel, actually. They've got both the physical as well as online. And for them to move from the 2D web app to a 3D metaverse, where you can just go and browse everything in their stores. And they've got an omni-channel capability, so they can deliver anywhere.
Wonderful.
So a lot of companies are focusing on it, and especially in the fast-moving consumer goods and others. The other day, I think Taj Group of Hotels actually sent me a thing saying that, we are announcing our metaverse. It wasn't a very impressive demonstration, but basically it enabled you to walk into any one of the hotels and then just go around.
Wow.
So, that's again another way for them to attract customers, where you can actually see what you're buying or what you're booking before you go there. So yes, there's a lot of interest in corporate. A lot of them are, looking at creating their own metaverses.
Wonderful. I've got time for two more questions.
Sure.
And staying with the metaverse, do we need, or do people who want to use the metaverse have to change their devices or make serious investments?
So the current generation, which is primarily more 2D, you can go ahead with what you currently have, the laptops and the phones and everything else, and the current networks are all reasonably okay for a 2D version. But, the moment you want to get to 3D, you need, special glasses. You need gloves which enable you to feel the sensation. You need many other different kinds of sensors, and you need huge bandwidth. And while the current generation of laptops are reasonably okay, you will have to buy a whole bunch of other capabilities to enable you to actually interact, to see, to touch, and feel. You still won't get smell, you still won't get other sensations, but at least or taste, but you will get, you still can't taste food, but you can see it and you will be able to touch it. But you won't be able to either hear you will not be able to smell it or taste it.
Amazing.
Yeah, but you do have to invest in that. That's why if you think about the gamers, they have very fancy consoles. They have a whole bunch of other equipments which enable them to interact very quickly and with the whatever game they're playing. You need that to get the full-fledged experience. So that is expensive. The difference in India between what's happening in India and what's happening in the abroad is in the abroad they're spending huge amounts of money in the US and the Western world in developing these different kinds of devices. But in the case of India, we're trying to see whether we can create a version of the metaverse where you don't need very expensive, devices like the Oculus or other such devices.
Fascinating. And my last question to you, Bhaskar, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your amazing journey in the world of technology and all the achievements you've had, what would you say are 3 lessons relating to technology and the metaverse you would want our young viewers and listeners to take away from our conversation and from your own experiences?
Sure. So I think principle number 1 is technology has the shelf life of a banana.
Okay.
If you ever build a business model based on a specific technology, you're doomed for failure. So that's lesson number 1.
Okay.
So therefore, if you have a purpose, it has to be independent of technology. If you have a vision, it has to be independent of technology, because technology, like I said, has a shelf life of a banana. And the best example of that is the Microsoft, which basically at one time its vision was a PC on everybody's desk. And when the PC died because it got taken over by the mobile phone, doesn't mean that the company should die. Luckily, they hired a Satya Nadella who changed the purpose of the company, and therefore, it made a lot of difference.
Yeah.
So I think that's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is, technology is an enabler.
Yeah.
And therefore, it cannot be the purpose. So a lot of companies say, I remember a State Bank of India chairman said, look, we have to use AI. I said, Mr. Chairman, for what purpose? What problem are we trying to solve? So you have to realize that today, technology has reached a stage where it can do everything, anything. What you need to do is to figure out what is the problem you're trying to solve. What is whether it's the business problem or the purpose or the strategy, what is it you're trying to solve? And technology is an enabler. A lot of people say my strategy is digital transformation. It cannot be. Digital strategy transformation is an enabler. But what you're trying to achieve with it is what is more important. Enhance customer service, faster time to market, reduce operational efficiencies, omni-channel fulfillment. Those are the problems you're trying to solve. And then you use whatever is the technology which is available.
That's it.
And I can talk for hours about what technology is appropriate at what stage of your evolution.
Correct.
And I think the last point, I think, is that we have to understand that because technology is like magic, the ability to use technology for bad, not for good reasons, is huge. And therefore, as technology evolves, the human value system has to make sure that it ensures that the technology is not misused. So values our value systems have to remain irrespective of the kind of technology which we use, and they have to go together.
Wonderful. Bhaskar, on that note, and your three amazing lessons, technology has a shelf life of a banana. The second one is technology is an enabler and not the end use itself. And the third one is that we must learn to manage technology for the good in line with our values. Thank you so much for speaking to me. I mean, I had thought we'll talk about multiple subjects, but it was such an engaging conversation only on the metaverse. And I'm sure in this 26 minutes, we have not even scratched the surface of the metaverse. And I'm sure I'll come back to you for a more detailed conversation sometime.
Let me send you a extract of the article which I just wrote recently. There's a lot more in that, which perhaps some of your readers may find
fantastic. And we'll put it as a link on your page and on our website. But thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. All the best.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.